Reasoning Power, Chapter 5, The Law of Logical Judgment. You are now invited to consider that important law of logical reasoning known as the law of logical judgment. The law represents the universal experience of human thought rationally applied and directed. The law of logical judgment is expressed in the third of the 7 axioms of logical reasoning, which is as follows. The axiom of logical judgment. All logical judgment is based upon these 3 fundamental laws of thought. 1. A thing is always just what it is and nothing else, at a given time and place, no matter what name or term may be employed to indicate, designate, or represent it. 2. A thing cannot both be and yet not be just what it is affirmed to be, at the same time and place. 3. A thing must either be or not be that which it is affirmed to be at a given time and place. There is no third alternative. This axiom embodies the essential principles of the ancient 3 laws of thought, which were first stated nearly 2,000 years ago by the old Greek philosophers. In their original form, they were as follows. Whatever is. No thing can both be and not be. Everything must either be or not be. These laws are known technically as the law of identity, the law of contradiction, and the law of excluded middle, respectively. Jevons has said of these laws, students are seldom able to see at first their full meaning and importance. All arguments may be explained when these self-evident laws are granted. It is not too much to say that the whole of logic will be plain to those who will constantly use these laws as their key. The 3 divisions of the axiom of logical judgment, embodying these 3 laws of thought, will be considered in detail as we proceed with our instruction concerning the law of logical judgment in this section of the book. Judgment is that mental process involving comparison and discrimination, i.e., discernment of resemblances and differences in the qualities of respective percepts or concepts, where the mind forms opinions and decisions concerning the nature of the things under consideration. Judgment is that power of the reason whereby it perceives the agreement or disagreement between 2 objects of thought. Reason in the process of judgment compares and decides. It is manifest in every act of reasoning thought. It manifests when you form your percepts, when you create your concepts, when you state your propositions, when you make your inferences. The mind cannot reason without employing judgments. To reason is to judge. To judge is to reason. Reasoning is a continuous process and judgment is always involved in it. Reasoning is the golden thread upon which are strung the pearls of successive judgments. Logical reasoning is one logical judgment after another. Let us now consider in detail the 3 elements involved in the axiom of logical judgment, which expresses the law of logical judgment. The law of identity. The first element of the law of logical judgment is that originally known as the law of identity, which in our axiom is as follows. A thing is always just what it is and nothing else at a given time and place, no matter what name or term may be employed to indicate, designate, or represent it. The first part of this statement, i.e., that a thing is always just what it is and nothing else at a given time and place, is so thoroughly self-evident that it requires no argument to substantiate it. In fact, the student first having it presented to his attention is often inclined to regard the statement as a waste of words. Its truth is so clearly evident. Its importance is realized only when one encounters fallacious reasoning in which the rule is violated. This principle, like the bee or wasp, has its sting in its tail. The rest of it is comparatively harmless. The sting-containing tail is as follows. No matter what name or term may be employed to indicate, designate, or represent it. Let us carefully examine this sting, which wounds so many who trifle with it. Let us begin by reminding you that most arguments are really disputes over terms rather than about facts. Again, that rational argument or thought is impossible without a preceding agreement upon the meaning of the principal terms employed. Once more, the essential point of issue of an argument, once properly stated and clearly defined, The argument is then at least partly completed, sometimes fully completed. The first rule of reasoning based upon practical logic is first define your terms. Careful observation will show you that most disagreements and arguments are really disputes over words. So you see, in order to apply the principle that a thing is always just what it is and nothing else, you must first find out the just what it is of the thing under consideration, the subject of reasoning, thought, argument, or dispute. This is accomplished by ascertaining and formulating the logical definition of the term most fitly indicating it. The following suggestions will prove useful to you in this direction. Logical definition. First, impress upon your mind the following statement. My full idea of just what a thing is expressed in a full, exact, and complete definition of the logical term indicating it. A dozen different names and terms may be applied to that thing in common speech, discussion, or argument, but its essential logical meaning is not altered in the least by reason of changes of names or terms. The thing remains just what it is, in spite of the changed names or terms. Before I attach a name or a term to a thing or logical thought, reasoning, or argument, I must be certain that such name or term fitly, completely, and logically designates that thing. I must also remember that a name or term indicating more than one thing is practically several names or terms. The following statement of the leading requisites of a logical definition will serve to indicate the character of the latter. 1. The definition should state all the essential characteristics of the thing. 2. Non-essential characteristics should not be stated in the definition. 3. Names or terms indicating the thing should not be included in the definition. It is illogical to define a thing by itself or in its own terms. 4. The definition should be stated in affirmative terms, negative terms being avoided so far as is possible. 5. The definition should be stated in plain, clear terms. All obscure, ambiguous, or equivocal terms, terms capable of several possible meanings or conveying only vague, hazy, and confused meanings, as well as all figurative language being avoided. You will discover that but very few such logical definitions are employed in ordinary popular argument, debate, dispute, or reasoning thought, hence the great number of fallacies apparent in such. Socrates, the famous Greek philosopher, held that a logical definition contained in itself the answer to most of the questions and problems vexing the mind of man. Accordingly, he formulated the now famous Socratic method, which consisted of having his pupils answer in the form of logical definitions his questions concerning the essential and fundamental nature and character of the things under discussion. Thus, he brought them down to first principles, or in the words of the current popular phrase, down to brass tacks. He delivered them of their essential ideas. His method was obstetrical. Socrates held that most questions and disputes arose over the meaning of words and terms. He was a wise man. The Socratic method, reduced to its simplest elements, may be applied by you in reaching your logical definition, in which is to be stated just what this thing is in the following 3 forms. 1. Ask yourself the question, what are the essential parts, elements, and factors involved in this thing? What are its essential qualities, properties, and attributes? What are its causes? What are its effects? How does it act? What does it perform? What does it do? Of what greater thing is it a part? Into what class or classes of things does it fit? 2. Ask yourself the following questions. What, when, where, how, why, and what follows? 3. Ask yourself the following questions. What is it? How do I know it? What of it? These 3 simple forms of applying the Socratic method will serve to deliver your mind of much essential information concerning the thing in question. This will aid you in formulating and passing upon the logical definition of that thing. It is difficult to leave the subject of Socrates in this consideration of the law of identity, for that old philosopher made this law his cardinal principle. His teaching was based largely upon its truth and the means whereby it might be applied in practical reasoning. Socrates had become disgusted with the notorious practices of the sophists, particularly with their habit of quibbling about terms and the names of things. He objected especially to their employment of forms of argument which amounted to but little, if anything, more than a play upon words, a species of punning in extreme cases. So he emphasized the law of identity and asserted that a thing is always itself, no matter what name may be attached to it, and that it is one's business to find out just what the thing is. To him, white was none the less white if the name black was applied to it. He insisted that calling a thing so does not make it so. He was opposed to the bad habit of calling things wrong names. Socrates cautioned his pupils always to be on guard against arguments or processes of quasi-reasoning, which are really but disputes about terms and names, and in which the suchness, the whichness, and the thingness of particular things are either carelessly or else deliberately ignored. His favorite aphorism was reason about things, not about terms or words. A noted modern logician has expressed the spirit of the Socratic thought in the following words: whatever is actually true of one term is also actually true of any term which is stated to be the same in essential meaning as the first term. Terms may be substituted, one for the other, provided that it is agreed that they refer to exactly the same things. Even the symbol X may be substituted for the class term bird if it be agreed that by X is meant feathered, winged, warm-blooded, egg-laying, biped vertebrate. Do you get the idea? It is this. It is the meaning of the term, not the form, letters, or sound that counts. Before leaving the subject of the law of identity, let us give you a few concrete examples of its value, a few real proofs of its virtue. The study of fallacy arising from the violation of a law of logic will go further toward proving the value and virtue of that law than will much greater study of its technical principles and meaning. The results of the violation of any valid law will bring to one the most convincing proofs of its validity. This is true in every branch or field of human thought or action. Illustrations of the law of identity. The following examples serve to illustrate the general principles of the application of the law of identity. Professor William James, in one of his essays, tells of a hunter who saw a squirrel clinging to a trunk of a tree. The hunter walked slowly around the tree to which the squirrel was clinging. The squirrel at the same time moved around the trunk of the tree so that its back was never presented to the hunter. Query: did the hunter walk around the squirrel or did he fail to do so? According to the laws of logical reasoning, he must either have walked around the squirrel or not have done so. He could not both have done so and yet not have done so. It must be one thing of the other, but which? This trick question has perplexed many keen practical minds at first, so many it has seemed like a problem in Einstein. But it really is sophistical in the form stated, the form so strenuously objected to by old Socrates. When the law of identity is applied to it, the difficulty vanishes. The gist of the question depends upon another question. Just what is meant by walking around the squirrel? If by walking around the squirrel is meant that the man proceeded so as to face in turn both the back and the front of the squirrel, then the answer must be that he did not do so. If, on the contrary, by walking around the squirrel is meant that the man proceeded so as to move completely around the place where the squirrel was situated, i.e., the trunk of the tree, then the answer must be that he did so. Without an agreement upon just what is meant by walking around, the logical meaning of the term, there can be no logical judgment. But this agreement once reached, this meaning once established, there can be but one logical judgment, and that a very easy one at which to arrive. The law of identity governs this case when its principles are logically applied, and in it you have an example of the virtue of the rules. Define your terms and reason about things, not about words. Another example, a whale is popularly known as a fish. It looks like a fish, it swims like a fish, it lives in water like a fish. Then is or is it not a fish? Popular opinion holds that it is a fish. because of the characteristics above noted. Naturalists hold that it is not a fish because it is a mammal, has lungs, is warm-blooded, and suckles its young at its breast and gives it milk, just as does any other mammal. Which is right? The disputants might argue indefinitely unless there was some agreement upon the meaning of the term fish, some logical definition of it. Reference to capable and competent authorities show that a fish is cold-blooded, has gills, and does not suckle its young, having no teats or mammary glands to do so. This scientific meaning of the term fish being ascertained and accepted, this answer immediately follows. The whale is not a fish, though it looks like one and lives and swims in the water like one. On the contrary, the same reasoning shows that the whale, as having all the essential qualities of a mammal, is and must be a mammal. Another example, a person asserts that the water in the bathtub is hot. Another says it is merely warm. A third holds that it is tepid. A fourth believes that it is cold. How is this dispute to be settled? Each reports the degree of heat sensation, or rather the heat perception, experienced by himself. Yet the temperature of that water remains certain, definite, fixed, at least for the moment. Lacking a standard of meaning governing the use of these several terms, there can be no agreement. The thermometer gives the certain, definite, fixed temperature, but it does not report whether such be hot, warm, tepid, or cool. Neither does the dictionary. Let us suppose that the disputants agree to accept the definition given by certain authorities on bathing. These authorities report that water is hot when its temperature is above 98 degrees Fahrenheit, that it is warm from 85 to 98 degrees Fahrenheit, that it is tepid from 75 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, that it is ice cold at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. This or any similar standard once accepted or adopted, the judgment becomes certain. The thermometer gives the true answer. Another example, a particularly dangerous form of fallacy claiming the protection of the laws of thought is that which arises from the assumption of some relative, comparative, or personal opinion by which the actions of persons or the character of things are measured. The fallacy consists in assuming that such relative, comparative, or personal opinion represents an actual fixed, certain standard, instead of being one dependent entirely upon the personal views, opinions, training, or prejudice of the individual employing it. For instance, it is often argued that such a person is noble, courageous, virtuous, vicious, selfish, unbusinesslike, etc., etc., etc. Such reasoning or arguments are always more or less futile and inconclusive because no fixed standard is agreed upon or accepted, no fixed measure of value agreed upon or accepted by the disputants. If some such fixed standard, as for instance one representing the best opinion of the time and place, is agreed upon and accepted, then the judgment is speedily reached. In absence of such, the reasoning or argument travels around in a circle, ever moving but never reaching a conclusion. The rule in such cases is this: define your terms, obtain an agreement upon the standard of measurement or value, and then reason logically from such. One is even justified to inquiring of others or of himself, good for what, when the argument or reasoning is concerned with the question whether or not a certain thing or action is good. Other examples illustrating the need of clearness of definition of terms are found in the later section of this book entitled The Law of Deduction, under the head, "The terms must be unequivocal and not ambiguous." That portion of our instruction should be studied and considered in connection with the present statements, and vice versa, for they are both concerned with the same principle of judgment. The law of contradiction. The second element of the law of logical judgment is that originally known as the law of contradiction, which in our axiom is stated as follows: a thing cannot both be and not be just what it is affirmed to be at the same time and place. We shall consider this logical principle in connection with the law of excluded middle, inasmuch as the same essential principle is involved in each and in both, and the two laws being complementary one to the other. The law of excluded middle. The third element of the law of logical judgment is that originally known as the law of excluded middle. which in our axiom is stated as follows: a thing must either be or not be that which it is affirmed to be at a given time and place. In the case of these two respective laws, as in the case of the one which we have just considered, the sting is found in the tail. In these cases, the sting consists of the clause contained in the statements of each, i.e., at the same time and place, or at a given time and place. When this point of time and place and that of definition of terms are fully understood, the application of these two principles becomes easy. The words at the same time and place or at a given time and place give additional definiteness to the proposition and serve to bring into a clear relief its essential meaning. The valid application of these two principles is illustrated by the following familiar example. You are either just where you are or not just where you are at the time you are reading these words. You must either be there or not be there. You cannot both be and yet not be there. And there is no third alternative in which the two extremes are harmonized or in which neither is the truth. This requires no argument. It is self-evident. Again, a dog must either be an animal or else not be an animal at a given time and place. It cannot both be and yet not be such, and there is no third alternative. This is self-evident. Again, a particular rose at a given time and place must either be red or else not red. It cannot both be and not be red, and there is no third alternative. Again, a whale must either be or not be a fish. It cannot both be and yet not be, and there is no third alternative. Such cases might be multiplied indefinitely. The principle involved is self-evident. It is as plain as the nose on your face. It is only when we consider the unwarranted and fallacious attempts to employ the principle that its importance is made clear. Let us now consider a few examples of this fallacious application. 1. The element of time and place. The time element and space element must be taken into consideration in the logical application of the laws of contradiction and excluded middle, respectively. While it is impossible for a thing both to be and yet not be, so and so or such and such at a given time and place or at the same time and place, and while it is impossible for a thing to avoid either being or else not being that under these conditions, yet it is quite possible for a thing to be such and such at one time and place and not be such and such at another time and place. Example, a piece of iron may be red hot at one time and not red hot at another time. Likewise, a piece of iron may be red hot at one end, i.e. one place, and not red hot at the other end, i.e. another place. But at the same time and place, it must be either red hot or not so. It cannot be both, and it must be either. Again, a man may be angry at one time and place and not angry at another time and place. But at the same time and place, he must be either one thing or the other. He cannot be both. Again, a piece of cloth may be red in one place, one part, and blue at another at the same time. Or it may be red today and be dyed purple tomorrow. But at the same time and place, it must either be red or not red. It cannot be both. Query: a man has cold feet and a hot head. Is he hot or is he cold? If so, why? Are the principles of logical judgment overcome or their laws violated in such a case? In this connection, you're asked to note that even in such cases as those above cited, the law of identity governs. The thing or man at any given time and place is always just what it is at that time and place, notwithstanding just what that just what may be found to be. 2. The element of relative terms. The distinction between absolute terms and relative terms, to which we have alluded in the preceding pages, also plays an important part in the application of these two laws or principles. Relative, comparative, or personal terms must not be employed as absolute, fixed, certain, definite terms in such application. We have already given you a typically illustrative example in the case of the water in the bathtub. Difference of opinion concerning the warmness or coolness or just rightness of the temperature of a room furnish another example. Here, the absolute, certain, fixed, definite, just what the temperature consists of the report of the thermometer that it is so many degrees Fahrenheit. Here, the absolute, certain, fixed, definite, just what the temperature consists of the report of the thermometer that it is so many degrees Fahrenheit. Whether it is cool, warm, or just right is a matter of individual feeling, unless a fixed standard be accepted or adopted by means of which these terms acquire a definite meaning. Here is a variation illustrating the same principle. A man stands before 3 different basins filled with water. The right-hand basin contains water heated to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The left-hand basin, water cooled to 35 degrees Fahrenheit. The middle basin water heated to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. The man places one hand in the cold basin, the other hand in the hot one, and holds them there until they distinctly feel the respective kinds of temperature. Then he withdraws both hands and suddenly plunges them into the water in the middle basin, which is heated to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. This causes his hot water hand to feel cold and his cold water hand to feel warm, by reason of the contrast. Query, is the water of the middle basin cold or not cold? One hand says one thing, the other hand another. How and why do the laws of logical judgment apply in this case? The answer is, the only certain fact is that the water in the middle basin is of a temperature of 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Only this and nothing more. The rest is a matter of interpretation of sensation according to the existing conditions. If water of 75 degrees Fahrenheit be regarded as it is by authorities as tepid or lukewarm, then the water must be regarded as so, notwithstanding the conflicting reports of sensation made by the respective hands. Note, if 2 thermometers disagree in their reports, get a standard one and abide by its decision. We advise you to fix the words lukewarm water in your memory, associating them with the above typical example. By doing so, you will have at hand a convenient and useful reminder not to commit the fallacy of confusing relative terms with absolute ones, personal feelings with fixed standards, permanent values with temporary ones. When you hear men arguing about their states of feeling or their notions, which they mistake for fixed absolute standards and values, remember the story of the hot hand and the cold hand and the tepid water in between them. We shall not, however, here press the additional point that the truth is found between the 2 extremes. Although this too is a fact of general experience, it is nevertheless another story and must be told elsewhere. 3. The element of false opposites. Another perplexing and frequently experienced obstacle to the proper application of the laws and principles now under consideration is that which arises from a confusion concerning the logical opposite of a certain attribute, property, or quality of an object. Thus, many persons think that the true opposite of white is black. Upon this basis, one applying the rules of the respective laws of contradiction and excluded middle would be compelled to reason as follows. This thing before me must be either white or else black, for it cannot be both, and there is no third alternative. This reasoning is, of course, fallacious, for the thing in question might be neither white nor black. It might be green or yellow or blue or orange or purple or any other color. It might even be colorless without our rules being violated. The explanation lies in the fact that black is not the logical opposite of white. The true logical opposite of white being not white. All of the colors are in the not white class, and it may be stated with logical certainty that everything that exists must either be white or else not white. It cannot be both, and there is nothing else for it to be but one or the other of those. The same state of affairs is found in the respective cases of the apparent opposites known as hot and cold, sharp and dull, and of all other cases in which the contrasting terms represent conditions manifested by the 2 extreme poles of a general class of things or characteristics. there being many degrees of difference between these two extreme poles. The same rule applies in cases like Republican and Democrat, Catholic and Protestant, etc. A man may be neither a Republican nor a Democrat, neither a Catholic nor a Protestant, but there is always a third alternative or a something else to be in such cases. The proper grouping of the opposites in these cases is as follows: Republican or non-Republican, Democrat or non-Democrat, Catholic or non-Catholic, Protestant or non-Protestant. Thus, each and every man that lives, no matter what may be his politics or religion, even if he be without political or religious affiliations, must be either a Republican or a non-Republican, a Democrat or a non-Democrat, a Catholic or a non-Catholic, or for that matter, either the King of England or not the King of England. The little prefixes not or non indicate the true logical opposite to anything whatsoever when attached to the name or term designating that thing. The combined laws of contradiction and excluded middle, rightly understood and logically applied, are found to possess the absolute character of arithmetical or geometrical laws and principles. No true exceptions to these laws ever have been discovered. Every apparent exception, when analyzed and explained, and becomes an additional verification. The human mind is compelled to think according to these laws when it reasons logically.